Welcome to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by TireRack.com, State Farm, and WeatherTech. Here's your MotorWeek podcast host, John Davis.
Hello, everybody, and welcome again to MotorWeek's podcast. And this is number 171. And we're sitting here in Studio C of MotorWeek Central. And around our weird-shaped table is writer-producer Brian Robinson.
Also weirdly shaped.
And there you go. Online content coordinator Greg Carlos.
Hey, hey.
Writer-researcher Garrick Zykin.
Thank you for having me again.
You're welcome. And video producer and editor Joe Ligo.
Good to be here.
Okay, lots to talk about, so let's not waste any time. LA Auto Show has, I guess at this point, pretty much come and gone, but we're fresh back from it for this podcast. Garrett, you are our person on the scene. You want to give us a rundown of some of the more important debuts there? As we go along, anybody want to comment on them, just do so.
Sure. So Porsche always draws a big crowd. The 718 Boxster GTS and 718 Cayman GTS horsepower increases to 365, which is 15 more than the 718S.
Can anybody at this table keep all of the Porsche models straight in their head?
Base,
anymore?
S, and GTS.
There you go. Very good.
Small,
Nicely
medium,
done.
and large.
Nicely done.
That's still out of a 2-liter, or I'm starting the 2.5 liter flat four, correct?
Mm-hmm.
365.
That's a lot of horsepower.
365.
Out of a
Right, yeah,
four-cylinder.
because that's
I
nuts.
think that can get lost in the scheme of other
That's
horsepower
your
cars.
base car.
Yeah.
Right.
Almost. All right, go ahead.
Also, Porsche 911 Carrera T. T stands for Touring. This is the lightest in the 911 Carrera lineup. 370 horsepower. PASM sports chassis is standard. The idea was the concept goes back to 1968, that pure 911 T experience. Also, 2018 Panamera Turbo S E-Hybrid Sport Turismo. It's a plug-in hybrid, 680 horsepower. It's their most powerful Panamera Sport Turismo, and they're getting some of their boost strategy from the 918 Spider. Doesn't have more horsepower than the Spider, but it.
Some trickle-down technology
who went to drive that?
That was Zach.
Zach.
Yeah, he did.
I edited the road test for him. I mean, that car
that
is
was
nuts.
the sedan, though, not the Sport Turismo. With
both,
the E-Hybrid.
With the
yeah.
Both vehicles were in
Yeah,
that test. But, yeah, that E-Hybrid system is nuts, man.
Right. And then they also had
Nuts,
the
man.
third-generation Porsche Cayenne, which made its U.S. Auto Show debut.
Looking down the
all
list,
news.
there's the Roadster version of the BMW i8. Was
feel
there
like
any other change there?
I feel like that's been around for already.
The Roadster?
Is that the first?
No, it's
No,
the first
the
time
Roadster was the
Roadster's
first.
out.
Because there's been must have been spy shots out of there for years.
They've been
'cause-
talking about it for a while.
Yeah.
You are right. There might have been like mock-ups that we've been seeing. I think it ups its range to like 18 miles. I think it was maybe 12 before. Or, it wasn't a huge boost, but basically just the Roadster and the Coupe both get increased range.
The Genesis G70, that one sort of snuck in under the radar. That's related to the Stinger.
It's the same car, Hyundai's
Same car?
version of it, yes.
Okay.
And the most interesting technological event seems to be the final Infiniti finally putting their new variable compression engine into a
Right.
vehicle, into the QX50.
Right. It's not just a concept. It's
Yeah.
going on sale soon.
I mean, that's a pretty amazing engine to deliver the kind of fuel economy from a diesel, but without all the diesel problems. Anything new to add from the auto show about it? Why did they pick that vehicle? Any idea?
I don't know, but it's a 2019 version, and the big selling point is that the variable compression ratio engine is production ready. So
It's in a crossover, so what else would they
Right,
put
yeah.
it in?
What-
If
that's-
they
yeah, I
want to
was
sell
gonna say-
any, they need to put it in a crossover.
Right. I agree with Brian on that. I was going to say the crossover is probably their best chance to sell the most of them the quickest.
Which is kind of bold considering it's new technology to the market. So
They're putting it in
if
a
something's going to
high-volume
go
vehicle.
wrong, a lot of people are going to know about it.
I mean,
Yeah,
if anybody I'd feel comfortable with, it's Nissan. They make
They
some
do
great
make
engines.
a good engine.
Well, they've been working on this for 20 years. They actually showed some concept of that. I think I saw it probably 15 years ago at a run-up to Tokyo Motor Show once. Wrangler, you've seen it up close and personal. I know on the outside it doesn't look that much different, but the inside seems to be a huge departure. Do you recall? It seems very busy now. We're used to Wranglers having a pretty straightforward, simple dash.
Right.
Anything else that struck you from seeing it in the flesh?
Right, and so they've gone back to some of the original designs. It increases its off-road capability. They were again trying to make it lighter wherever they can, as a lot of cars are.
If you saw it on the street, would you recognize it as a new vehicle?
You would recognize it as a Jeep. I don't know as a new. You'd have to get up close to look at some of the subtle changes.
Mm-hmm. Anybody that's familiar with Wranglers would definitely know it's the new one.
But a non-Jeep initiate might just
correct.
I think it's just another Jeep.
It almost, to me, when I saw it, I mean, it helps to see them side by side, and you see, lights moved here, blinkers moved here, and different things. But I don't know. I kind of wanted more radical styling, but then at the same time,
I think they learned their
I
lesson.
don't think they have any
can't-
incentive to
Considering
change
that the
it. It's like-
Cherokee is now going back to a traditional Jeep face.
right, yeah.
The Wrangler. If you're a Jeep purist, I mean, you're still going to like it, and it's just better than it was before.
They didn't have any hints there that you heard about the pickup, what it's going to be called, or anything else.
No mention on that.
A surprise to me was that Lincoln is relaunching the MKX as a Nautilus.
Yes.
I guess we should have had hints since they brought back the Continental name and so forth. But still, after spending all that time and effort trying to get us into an alphanumeric ratio.
Right.
So the vehicle itself, was it just a facelift?
It looks better, so probably yes. I mean,
It's a facelift,
it's a facelift.
it's probably like everything else Ford has done lately. There's a lot of new tech in it and so forth.
Right, exactly. But along with the look, the name change was really quite a surprise, I think, for the group there.
They got some different technology in there too. They got this like lane centering technology. That I guess just from what I understand, just kind of keeps you centered in the lane.
Right.
And what was the other one? Yeah, evasive steer assist. That was the other one that apparently will actually, if you're coming up on something and it takes it a step further than just braking, it actually tries to avoid the actual collision itself.
Yeah.
Another step forward towards
And some of
autonomous driving.
of course, Lincoln's Black Label interior themes continue to get more and more wild. There was like a magenta-colored interior scheme for that. So I think it's cool to see how far they keep pushing the envelope on that, bringing back colors you haven't seen since like the 70s on car interiors.
I think it's interesting that Mercedes brought the CLS to L.A. when you consider, I mean, I was around in Frankfurt for the very first CLS unveiling and, of course, wrongly guessed, like, this is a weird-looking coupe. Why are they doing this? Now it's become one of their mainstays. But besides just sleeker and a little bit more modern, did anything else impress you about it?
It has there's a new inline-six engine, and they say it's the first vehicle in the Mercedes-Benz lineup with a 48-volt technology.
So that's their first one. I thought that's funny. I thought the S-Class had it.
The S-Class doesn't?
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, at least it shows that technology is going to spread. Before we get away from this, two others. Subaru Ascent.
Yes.
So what is that?
It's their largest Subaru ever.
This is a three-row.
Three-row. It's 3 rows. And it has seating up to 8.
B9 Tribeca, which is not really a true 3-row.
This is kind of they're entering back into that market. You know, that's probably going to be a giant success.
Yeah. Well, sure. I mean, they say seating up to 8 and symmetrical all-wheel drive is standard. So you get that safety that you want of Subaru with more
The seating for 8 is an interesting point because a friend of mine who has a lot of kids was saying the Ascent is like automatically on his list because a lot of 3 rows you can get 6 or 7 max. He said that 8 seating thing is like the difference between buying a 15-passenger van or buying 2 cars for his family.
And the Subaru Crosstrek has spawned yet another new SUV from Toyota. It's called the FTA See.
Correct.
I was wondering what that was. I didn't realize.
Yes.
So
Subaru.
Can you tell us a little bit more about it? Just from looking at the pictures, it really sort of looks like a Crosstrek with a Toyota grill on it.
FTA See, Future Toyota Adventure Concept.
Love it.
The idea is for folks who live in the city, but like to go away for the weekend, like hiking and more adventurous.
Young, active lifestyle people.
Young, active
Those
lifestyle
dang
people.
millennials.
Well, millennials who like to rough it on the weekend. So it's designed to be rugged.
So more importantly, they don't want to just get out of the city. They actually want to go back at some point. Like most people.
Monday through Friday they have to park it, and then on the weekends they can go off-road. Gasoline-powered engine, but they're talking maybe a hybrid.
Of course, with their system, I guess.
Sure, and variable terrain response settings. So they're serious about this being able to actually go off-road, not just look like it can go off-road.
And the other big news from there is Green Car of the Year.
Yes, the Honda Clarity. I think what set it apart was the fact that it has a hydrogen fuel cell variant, whereas the other competitors did not.
And they're going to do 3 versions, right? Mm-hmm. They're going to do the hydrogen version, a plug-in electric.
And electric.
And full electric.
And full electric.
Yeah, the full electric's the one that everybody's scratching their heads on.
It's only like 89 miles.
It's
the fuel cell, you got to give them credit, but
yeah.
There's only a couple people out in California that are able to buy it, so I'm not sure why that's very
true. And you have to actually get one. You have to be within a certain range of the fueling stations,
which is only in California.
Right. Toyota announced last week that they're actually going to build a plant to make hydrogen. So I guess they finally decided to say, well, we can't get anybody else to supply this stuff, and we're going to build a vehicle.
Still hanging on.
We're going to do that.
Sure.
Anything else you want to add from the show?
Nissan Kicks.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you about
kind
that.
Kind of a smaller version of the Rogue.
How many small SUVs do they need? I mean, they got the Juke, Rogue Sport. Rogue. They need the Kicks.
Now, did they say anything about the help me?
About
is this the new Juke?
Going away?
Yeah. They didn't. I have read.
Everybody else is talking about the Juke going away.
There's some speculation that
will
happen.
Well, it's interesting. In this show where we run this particular test, we've got the Rogue Sport, and we compare it to the Juke, and then later in the show, this will pop up with the LA saying, well, guess what? Here's a third one, or maybe it's going to be the second one.
Sure, and I like driving the Rogue Sport and the Rogue, so I'm kind of with you. How much smaller do you have to get? But again, they're going for folks who live in the city. Then the other one along that, the Hyundai Kona, another small crossover.
They'll sell a million of them.
Yeah, that's actually coming to the U.S. market.
And that looked like that was sort of along the lines of the Crosstrek. Is that the same market?
Yes.
As you could tell it?
Yes. Definitely smaller because right now they just have the Sportage as their small one. They don't have a true subcompact.
Right. And that you don't have to wait long for, first quarter 2018. They're going to have 2 engines, 2-liter, but also a 1.6-liter turbocharged. So...
Thank you very much, sir. That's about as thorough a report from Autoshow as we could have possibly got.
Leave it to Garrick.
I try.
Lots of
overachieving as always.
Don't leave. Don't leave.
Well, I think we did miss. There's actually a updated Sorrento, which is actually actually dropping the 2-liter turbo option, which we had in our long.
That was our long term. I'm very surprised at that. Yeah. Although we did have a problem with it, the exhaust being so hot it melted my luggage, but
so I think they got the it'll be a 2.4 liter offering, and then if you want to go to the V6, you get a new 8-speed transmission, and then the Nero, which we have a long term now, is getting a plug-in hybrid version, which is kind of the way things are going. I think if you're really serious about
Hyundai
being in the
Kia
eco
is
game,
expanding their plug-in game, because we just did the Kia Optima road test, and there's a hybrid version or a plug-in version of that coming. So it's all part of the strategy.
That's it.
Okay, Joe, you're up next.
No, not me. You
can go on. Go ahead, Joe.
I'm sorry, Mr. Robinson.
Oh.
Would you like to take
That's
over
my
for
intro?
me?
No.
Okay. On every show, about every 6 to 8 weeks, we do a bike test.
I try to get 5 or 6 of them in there a year. I'll sneak an extra one in there if you don't notice.
Brian has, for how many years now, has been our two-wheeling expert?
Oh, that's a good question. Maybe, 8 or 10?
8 or 10?
Yeah.
And this bike caught me when I saw it. I really stopped to look at it, and I am the first one to admit that I'm not a motorcyclist. The Ducati Scrambler Desert Shield, and we also had Sled, and we also had the Indian
Shield.
I needed glasses. We also had the Indian Scout Bobber, and it was both of these bikes were throwback bikes as far as appearance. And is this like they both represent new trends or what?
Well, yeah, very similar in that they're current evolutions of current bikes designed around a styling theme. And the Desert Sled Ducati.
SLED.
It's a takeoff on Scramblers, which is nothing new. Triumph's had one out, even BMW's got one. They're basically revivals of 70s California guys that took their street bikes, tried to make them more capable in the desert and going off-road before they were traditional dirt bikes.
How did you like it?
I liked it a lot.
Did you like it more after you spent time with it than you did initially?
I think so. It's very comfortable. Ducati's noteworthy in that they've been the fastest growing brand in the U.S. for some time now, in that largely just from selling cheaper motorcycles. And they've embraced this whole Scrambler concept. It's like a sub-brand of Ducati now with like 11 different styling themes to choose from. This Desert Sled one is like the most true to the theme. It's got a taller suspension, skid plates, knobby-ish tires. It's, of all of them, the one you would feel most comfortable taking off-road.
How about on-road? Was it too rough?
Not at all. It feels just like driving a Monster, Ducati Monster. They're, standard, which is what it's based on largely. So it actually feels more like, driving a traditional Ducati more than like an off-road bike.
And the other bike is the Indian Scout Bobber.
That one.
Now, that was the one that when I looked at it, I said, I've seen this bike before. And the answer was in every old World War II movie you can think of where some messenger was running to the, riding to the front line in a record pace. What is this bike memory of?
Yeah, the Indian Scout, that's their entry-level model for Indian. And then the Bobber theme, it's been around for a long time, but basically really picked up after World War II when there were a ton of surplus military bikes. Service guys got them, chopped off all of the Army stuff, mounts and everything, and then while they're at it, they chopped off all the fenders and chopped everything that they could off, basically, and made it a bobtail, and then people started calling them Bob Jobs, and it got into... Anyway, it's a stripped down Scout. Everything's blacked out. Fenders are minimal, what they can legally be. The suspension's lowered, and it's just a solo seat. Back to basics, 60s, 50s style. And it's one bike, I get bikes in all the time. I take them out, and people stop you and give you comments. It's one bike that everyone that saw it liked it. I mean, some people like some bikes, some people don't, but everyone commented on what a beautiful bike it is. But like a lot of bikes that are designed around a styling theme, it's not the most comfortable bike. I can ride just about any bike for a long time. That one, I was looking forward to getting off of, not too much longer after I was on it. But I love to look at it, that's for sure. And both of them are priced around $11,500, so very inexpensive bikes as well.
Thank you, sir. And with that, we're going to move on to our lightning round, where we all have 30 seconds to respond to a question. When time's up, we're going to hear Joe and his bell. Okay. A fun question for the holidays. I'm reading off of Joe's script here. We've all been very good this year. That's debatable. And we want to wake up to find that Santa has left a brand new set of keys in our stocking. Let's go around the table. What would it be to?
Yeah. What do you want Santa to bring you this year?
Who's going first?
Start with Gary.
Mercedes 560 SL from 1987 to 89.
Wow, that's very specific.
That's very specific.
Because I want one.
Will you tell us why?
I just...
Do you like
I like the looks. I've never driven one. I'm sure they're great. But every single time I see them, I just stop what I'm doing. And
it's all of his search history on his office computer.
yeah, right. Right, exactly.
Could be worse.
Could be.
Joe, how about you?
Look at my computer.
I was thinking new car.
No.
New car, not old car.
That's all right.
Since high school, I've wanted a Model S, but it's kind of getting a little long in the tooth. So I don't know. There's
high school.
I love that.
Just to show how young we are.
I drove the Volvo S90 this year. I loved how comfortable that was. I know it's kind of an old man sedan, but I loved it. But then also, you can't go wrong with a Mazda MX-5. You look out the window and see that.
Yeah, Joe.
So I'll go with the
MX-5.
Santa's going to think you're going to be a hog.
I'll go for the MX-5. Merry Christmas.
Brian Robinson.
Probably the Dodge Challenger Demon. As far as what we drove this year,
Especially since you can turn around after a short period of time and get rid of it.
Yeah, we haven't seen a car like that made strictly for drag racing in maybe ever, and 840 horsepower. It's right up my alley. I'll take that one.
Yeah.
Greg, how about you?
Yeah, I would actually take a sibling to that one. I'd probably go Trackhawk.
Nice.
I would normally go like 911 GT3 or GTS maybe, but considering that I have a dog and a wife who likes to drive with me, I think it's just easier to get everybody into a 700 horsepower SUV.
It's interesting you mentioned the dog first. I'm just saying. Oh, that's a Freudian thing.
Well, she would do that to me, so I think it's just fair.
It's really the dog that's in charge of the family.
No comment. I'm just going to stop while I'm ahead. If I was ever ahead.
Sorry, Greg.
Do I get a turn?
Yes.
All right.
Oh, absolutely.
I have been a fan of the Ford GT since the 60s when the first ones came out, and I think the Ford GT would be what I want in my stocking, but surprise, not the new one, the previous generation one, which I thought was a spectacular car and very roadable. It looked more like the original than the new car does, by sure, and it also is a terrifically comfortable car to drive every day. So cool. The last generation, previous generation, should say the second generation Ford GT4 GT.
Nice.
That's pretty cool.
Yep.
Well, maybe if you're good, Santa will bring it.
I don't know if I'm going to be that good. And here's a question that pertains to something that we're rather unique about. On our show, on many of our road tests, after we put up the fuel economy ratings, we do their environmental footprint, and we always talk about how many barrels of oil they use and also how much they emit in greenhouse gases. So here we have a question from Frank, sent in this email. It says, how can a vehicle that uses 6 barrels of oil yearly emit 2.7 tons of CO2? Which I don't know exactly which vehicle he's talking about, but he goes on to say, 6 barrels of crude oil weighs in at about 1,800 pounds. Okay, about $300 pounds a barrel. But 2.7 tons is 5,400 pounds. How can a vehicle emit more weight in CO2 than the weight of gasoline it burns? Before I give you what I think is the answer, would anyone like to jump in on that?
I have no clue, but
sounds like fake news to me.
Yeah, the 1,800 pounds of oil does not translate to 1,800 pounds of gas anyway. So, but anyway.
Yeah, that's very true. That's good. Yeah. Well, first of all, when it looks at how much oil is used, it's talking about everything. It's talking about oil that is in lubrication, oil that might be used up that's used in making the tires. Don't ask me how they come up with these numbers.
Right,
but they are very scientific numbers that they use. But what the question fails to take into consideration is that you don't emit out your tailpipe a 1-to-1 ratio. You have to allow for the fact that about 14 to 15 times more air is taken into an engine than fuel. That air, most of it is converted to some form of greenhouse gas.
Right.
So you're emitting out the tailpipe in the order of 10 to 15 times more exhaust than you probably took in as fuel. And that's how you get these elevated numbers. Now, I might point out that number he's talking about is not equal to 10 times. It's something less than that. Yeah. But you have to take into effect that you're sucking in an awful lot of air for what little bit of fuel you use.
And we get those numbers from fueleconomy.gov. It's not something that we sit down and calculate every week.
We're not that smart.
Correct.
Right. But they do come from the government, and they are basically based on scientists. And here Joe has called
on the video version of the podcast, I'm putting up the chemical equation for when you burn isooctane, and it bonds with oxygen, and the carbon in the isooctane bonds with the oxygen. So that's where the extra tonnage comes from. It comes from that oxygen.
He had the scientific answer right from the start.
Don't forget to carry the tube.
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of that, and thank you very much, Frank. It was a very good question. Frankly, it's one that quite a few of our viewers have asked us over the last several years. Before we wrap up this edition of our podcast, any rants and raves, anything new that strikes you about
Got a quick little rave.
The holiday driving? Go ahead.
Well, this is looking at the auto show, and we talked about how the Stinger and the G70 are the same platform. Hyundai and Kia I don't even want to use the term badge engineering because it's not quite right, but they badge engineer better than almost any other automaker. Like, you remember...
Bold statement.
I love old cars, but there's some pretty terribly badge engineered cars from like the 80s and stuff, like where it's clearly all the same body panels and a different grille, like, Chevy Cavalier, Pontiac Sunfire kind of stuff. But I think it's amazing how different Hyundai and Kia can make the same platform. It's the platform and the engine and the transmission are the same, but then the cars can look so wildly different. An Optima and a Sonata, or the Stinger and the G70. I think that's really impressive how much mileage they can get out, and how, to the average consumer, you can't really tell them apart. I think auto journalists can tell them apart, but I think that's really impressive.
I think there's significant differences.
It's not like, Ford Mercury kind of stuff from the 90s.
Just the badging. So, anybody else for the rant and rave?
That's a mini.
Do you find people are getting nicer as the holidays approach driving, or worse?
Never get nicer.
Yeah. One car we didn't talk about that was at L.A., and I have not seen it, was the new Corvette ZR1, the convertible.
Right.
How does that look versus everything else from this C7 Corvette? Was it monster? I mean, the pictures, it looks really mean. Do you recall whether it stuck out, or, I mean, this is supposedly the last gas for the C7?
I think really mean is a good description.
Yeah. We've seen the coupe, but haven't seen the convertible. They didn't do anything extra to it, did they?
It was a convertible at LA. That, as far as I know, it's just the same. Everything's the same. You got a soft top, which
was it? How much is the horsepower?
That there's I don't know why I hate the fact that there's a ZR1 soft top. Yeah, that just makes no sense to me. But
700 plus horsepower.
I know people love them, but I don't like those people.
Automatic, man. That's where it's at.
Yeah,
I'm just going to
something for the Palm Springs cruiser.
I'm going to quote Benny D and say, I've been sick of the C7 for about like 3 years now. That's what he said.
Well, come Detroit, maybe we'll have the new mid-engine Corvette to talk about. That wraps up this edition of our MotorWeek podcast, number 171. Brian Robinson, Greg Carlos, Garrick Zeiken, and Joe Ligo, thank you all for participating. Also like to thank Jim Bigwood, our audio engineer, for making us sound usually more intelligent than we actually are, and podcast creator Bob Mixter. And as I mentioned, Joe is also our producer for the podcast. Thank you all very much for joining us. We hope you enjoyed it. And remember that MotorWeek is viewable on most public television stations around the country. You can go to our motorweek.org website for more details. And soon we will have a new station and time locator that will it will amaze you. It will be so accurate.
To use. Yeah.
It's only about 10 years overdue.
Exactly. Also, be sure to catch us on Tuesday nights and really all week long on the Velocity Cable channel. I'm John Davis for all of us at MotorWeek. Thanks very much for joining us. Have a great holiday season.
You've been listening to the podcast of MotorWeek, television's original automotive magazine. MotorWeek is made possible by TireRack.com, State Farm, and WeatherTech. For additional information on podcasts, videos, and showtimes, visit our website at motorweek.org. And watch MotorWeek, television's longest-running automotive magazine series, each week on your local PBS station.